Howdy coders. So today's going to be a little bit different. There's something I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is to make a monorepo. Now, I've actually never done this. And so I thought, I could learn this on my own and then create a video about it. Or maybe we just try to learn it together live and see how it goes. If I fail miserably, then I'll go back and create another video that maybe makes it look a little bit nicer. I just kind of wanted to try this out. In our last video, we created both a backend and a front-end application for kind of this form viewer, a piece of software that could collect form submissions and display them here. This involves both a Node backend running in Docker, as well as a Create React App front end that runs in the Create React App ecosystem. These, though, exist in two different code repositories. And so I have a FormHub BE for backend and FormHub FE for front end. And that's okay. We maintain a couple of different apps at my company, and they're actually all like this. All of our apps have multiple repositories for backend, for front end. Some of them have a Redis repository to store Redis configurations, things like that. But the monorepo trend is really catching on and becoming supported by more and more hosting providers out there. So let's dive in. I haven't done any prep work for this. And let's see if we can take our FormHub app that consists of a backend and front end and combine this into one code repository. So no warranties here. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll figure it out together. So let's dive in. Okay, so I know I want to use Turborepo. I know that for sure because it seems to be the popular one right now. There are a couple different options out there, but this is one that was just acquired by the fine folks at Vercel. And so it's highly supported by them. I'm not going to end up posting this on Vercel, but it's highly supported by them, and it does seem to be the cool one out there on the scene. So I want to figure out how we add this. So let's go into the docs here and just take a look at what they have. I'm wondering if they have any starters for like Create React App. Turborepo Create React App. I don't see any official docs on that, so let's check this out. Create a new workspace, filtering workspaces. Hi, Sam. Let's see. What is a monorepo? Packages, migration. Let's just start with their Create Turbo and see where that takes us. I'm going to open up a new desktop here. We'll open up a terminal. And let's run their command. See what I have here. I have our two FormHub installations here. So we're going to create a monorepo, and it's just going to be simply named FormHub. So let's see what their doc. npx create turbo at latest. npx create turbo at latest. I do want to install. Where would you like to create your Turborepo? Let's do FormHub. Freudian slip there. FormHub. Let's use Yarn. That's what I like. Oh, I'm trying out this new layout. today. Sorry if my face is covering some of this. Okay. Let's see. Oh, thanks for watching Late Night, Sam. Good night. Let's see. You can update by running npx turbo login, yarn run build, yarn run dev. Okay, let's open this up in VS Code and see what happened here. So it created a couple of different apps here. We have a web app, which is a Next app. And we have a Docs app, which is also a Next app. Okay. So we're going to end up having two different apps in our repository as well, one being the backend and one being the front end. So we're running, I'm going to skip through a lot. Let's see, exploring, listing, building, running, package installation, building your app, deploying with Docker. That is something we will want. Okay, let's check out these Docker docs because I do want our backend to run in Docker. So let's maybe try to get, since we have a nice page on this here, let's maybe try to get the backend running in Turborepo first. So the problem, TLDR and a monorepo, unrelated changes can make Docker do unnecessary work. That is true. You want to deploy app/docs using Docker so you can create a Docker file. The solution is to prune the inputs to the Docker file to only what is strictly necessary. Turborepo provides a simple solution, turbo prune. Running this command creates a pruned version of your monorepo in an out directory. It only includes workspaces which docs depends on. But can optimize caching with Docker, but ideally want to copy them in 2 stages. Okay, so they have examples here. I'm guessing this is a lot. Okay, awesome. So they have examples. We'll go back into what Docker, and here's Create React App as well. Okay, so these are the 2 examples we'll be exploring today then. With Docker for the backend and with Create React App for the front end. So again, let's start with Docker. Let's go back to the docs though. Here's the Docker file. Okay, so it's pretty extensive Docker file here. But that's okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I've seen this before. So it's starting with multiple, I don't even know what you call this. So it's starting from multiple pre-built images, and then it's aliasing them. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but it's aliasing them. So we have a builder, an installer, and a runner. And then it's using copy from builder, and then copy from installer, automatically leverage output traces to reduce image size, copy from installer, and then finally running it. So a pretty extensive Docker setup here. I've actually never used this as command. I do want to get that terminology down. So Docker from as, I want to know what that's called. Just accept all cookies. I don't care. let's see, name your build stages. Okay, so by default, stages are not named. So this is naming a stage. Multi-stage builds are useful to anyone who has struggled to optimize Docker files while keeping them easy to read and maintain. So part of the point of this is to keep the image size down. Okay. All right, we'll tuck that away, and we'll follow the example as best we can here. So let me look in this example repo. So we're looking at the with Docker example inside the Turborepo examples. And I want to see what their apps look like. So similar to us, they have an API, a backend, and a web app. Hi, Wonderdust. Let's see here. So I want to see, do they have, okay, I actually kind of expected a Docker file. Oh, we have a Docker compose in the root. Okay. And then each app has a Docker file. Okay. Alrighty, so let's take a look at the API app. I'm going to assume that's the backend. I think that's a safe assumption. And they have this file in here. Okay, so this follows the example that we're seeing here in the docs, where they have a multi-stage build. It's our new terminology we just learned. And I want to know, where is this starting from? So I want to know what the root is that this is all running from. Okay, so this is really important. So inside the Docker compose file that is in the root of this example, this is where it's defining our different Docker services. And for each service, it's defining the Docker file. However, it's marking that the context is the current directory. So rather than making the context start within the app/web directory or the app/API directory, it's actually starting at the very root of the Monorepo. So what that means is when you're referring to things inside each Docker file, you are starting at the root of the Monorepo, not inside of the local app that it is referring to. Okay, so that's good to know. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy in from our backend the Docker compose file and the Docker file, and see if we can get these running. Probably going to be a bit of trial and error here, but that is okay. We are ready for that. Okay, so let us how do I want to do this? I'm going to go ahead and copy over. I'm just going to use the good old Finder window. I'm going to go ahead and copy over columns view, please, always. Such a non-developer thing to do, right? I'm not using the terminal to copy. Okay. Form Hub, apps. I want to copy over the backend. Now, there's a lot of things in here, including node modules, but I'm just going to copy all this in. So I'm going to option drag this because I want to copy it and not move it. Okay, so that's copying real fast, and I'm just going to go in and delete our node modules directory because I'm going to let it install itself. Okay, so if I go back here, we have Form Hub BE in here now. Let's rename that to Backend. And I don't really care anything about docs here, but I'm not going to delete what this started with because I don't want to anger anything. So let's start here. Okay, we have a Docker file, and then here's our Docker Compose file. It was in our backend, but we want to move that to the root. So I'm going to move that out here to the root. Okay, so we have Docker Compose, and then we have our Docker file inside of the backend. And both of these, I'm sure, will require several changes. So let's take a look. Let's take a look first at our Docker Compose file. So we have container name. That's kind of convenient. I don't really need that. Build. This is the first thing we'll need. So for backend, instead of building the current directory, which is the root directory from the standpoint of this compose file, we're going to build the backend Docker file with the context being root directory. Okay, that's good. Now, the example doesn't specify the volumes option. And the volumes option is what allows us to do not technically hot reloading, but kind of hot restarting. So we don't have to rebuild our image every single time. And I do definitely want that. So I'm just going to adjust this a bit to where instead of saying the root is the app volume, I'm going to say apps backend is the app volume. Okay, I think everything else in our Docker Compose file works out. Now, by the way, there's a whole first part of this video where I build up the backend and front end. And so if you want a walkthrough of this Docker Compose file, how we got to this state at all, I did all of this from scratch. And so you can watch my last video to check that out. Okay, so I think, cross our fingers, I think that that's going to be pretty good for our Docker Compose file. Let's move on to the harder part, which is going to be this Docker file. And for that, I'm going to pull up these windows side by side. A little window management here. Okay, so let's go into the example API Dockerfile. And we're going to try to use this as closely as possible. Now, the first difference I notice is there's Node Alpine, and then I'm just using Node. The Alpine is the best default. I completely agree with them. However, I have run into issues using the Prisma database library that we're using with the Alpine build. I hope that that gets adjusted one day, or maybe there's a workaround for that. There is probably a good way to do this, but I know the full node image works great. So I'm going to use the node image, at least for the runner, because I know that we'll probably need that at runtime. We might even need that either in an installer or build. So I am going to start with Alpine as they have in here, but we might have to bow back out to the node full image. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy most of this into the file. It looks like most of this is pretty generic. So we know I need to change the scope. So this is the name of their service. And actually, so far, that's the only thing I see that would need to be changed for this first half. So I'm going to create a comment here with just a good old line so we know whose is whose. So I'm going to start with theirs. And instead of scoping the API, remember in our app tree here, I called this backend. So I'm going to say that we're going to use that prune thing that we saw in the docs, scope this to backend. All of this other stuff looks good. Build the project and its dependencies. So we're going to build, copy. Again, we have a filter here. ... is interesting. I'm not exactly sure what that would be. Is that in their docs too? It is. Okay, I'm going to search this page. I don't know what the ... means. Okay. From add group, don't run production as root. Okay. Installer and run. Okay. The rest of this looks pretty good too. Let me go ahead and copy this in as well. And again, we're going to change our filter to backend. And then I noticed when I did that, we have one more reference here to API in the run command. Now, this is interesting. So the working directory is app. However, I'm wondering if that is our individual app or the root of our monorepo tree. I'm guessing it's /app/apps API dist index. That's not exactly what I want to do. I want to run a yarn command. And I need to change our current directory. So we're going to adjust this a bit. And I'm going to copy up our working directory change. And we're just going to make sure we know exactly what that does. That just changes the current working directory. So we want to change that to app. Pretty sure it will be /apps/backend. And then instead of running their command, we're going to do ours. They don't have an expose in here, which is interesting. It's a little odd. Let me see if they had something in compose. They do not. Okay, I am going to go ahead and add this expose in here. And we are going to have a couple of additional install steps. So what we've done so far is we're exposing and running. We're using Node, and we've set a current working directory. So I'm kind of working my way down here to apply what we were doing before. So this is all getting to running. This is getting to building. Yarn turbo run build. Let's see what the API has set up to do as far as building. So the API script to build is running TSC. So that's running the TypeScript compiler. And that's likely going to get run right here. In our example, we're running yarn to install all the dependencies, which it is doing up here. So I think that we will be good on that front. So really it comes down to making sure we're copying in all the right things, which we should be doing here. Okay, I'm going to assume we're copying in all the right things. We are running a yarn build. So the thing that we're down to is we need to generate our Prisma client. And the Prisma client happens after the yarn install, but before the yarn build. So we have a yarn install and we have a yarn build. Now the build does accommodate for the having the application in there itself. And we will need all of our app files. Just to install dependencies, there are fewer things that you need. So I'm going to add this to the builder section. So we've copied in the full app. Actually, no, we've copied in the installed dependencies. Okay. Running build. I'm not sure where we're getting. Okay, here we go. Builder copies in everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of like down here, we have yarn build. Let's go ahead and let's run our yarn Prisma generate. We may or may not need this copy command here. Just going to mark that for later. So I am going to run that right before our build. And we'll see if that works. Okay, great. So we have Form Hub. We have a Docker file. We have a Docker Compose file. I do think I'm going to go ahead and delete these examples. Though we do have, okay, so in Turborepo, there's the concept of apps and there's the concept of packages. I'm assuming that apps are things you run and packages are things that are shared. So in here, they have ESLint config as well as TS config. Let's take a look at our backend. We do have both ESLint and TS config in here. There's probably going to be a more optimal way for us to reuse these. So they have a base, Next.js, and React library. Okay. They extend each other. So React library extends base, Next.js extends base, and package.json is just defining the package itself. So that is something we will want to look into. We don't have any shared UI right now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out the parts that we're not using. So let's delete out the shared UI. I'm going to leave the TS config and ESLint in here because I would like to use those later, whether we get to it in this video or not. And let's delete out the apps we're not using. So let's delete the Docs app. We're not using that. And let's delete the web app. We're only using the backend right now. Okay, now let's pull open this package. It's not referring specifically to any of the apps. Okay, let's open turbo.json. Again, also not referring specifically to any of the apps. So I think we're good here. So for the first time, let's try running this thing. So let's take a look at what our commands are to run this, and maybe we refer to the documentation here as well. Okay, so they don't have anything in addition here about running in Docker. I assume you just do your normal Docker compose up. So let's run a yarn just from the main directory to make sure that we have all of the dependencies installed. It looks like we didn't. So when we ran the npx create turbo to initialize our Turborepo app, then it didn't actually run all the dependencies. So we just did that. We ran yarn. That succeeded, so that's a success. Now let's try running our Docker compose. Now, in order to have shown you what we did earlier, I do actually have this app running separately in the background. So I'm going to go stop that here. So I'm going to Control-C this to stop that and Control-C this. So now I'm not running anything in Docker, shouldn't be, and not running anything in Create React App. In fact, let's do a Docker PS. So nothing is running in Docker. Great. So switching back over to our Monorepo, let's do a Docker compose up and see what happens. Okay, so it found our Docker file. It's downloading the Alpine image. It's getting pretty far, actually. Okay, we have our first error saying run turbo prune scope backend Docker. Error, invalid scope package backend not found. Okay. Perhaps we need to build this with Turborepo first. So I'm checking the docs here. Let's check out, did I close? Did I close that? No, I had that open here. So let's check out the with Docker package. We have build. We're going to do this. We're going to do a build at the root that might need to prepare some things to get us started. Let's try that. So from the root, I'm going to run a yarn build. It says one successful. Okay. Doesn't seem like that did much, but let's try our Docker compose up again. Okay, invalid scope again, package backend not found. So I'm going to go to our trusty Googler, Turborepo package not found. See what happens. Let's add in Docker in there even. You'll see this error. I'm rechecking the Docker example to see what they have here. See if there's anything that might, let me look at the Turbo. Okay, that doesn't look too different, I don't believe. Well, it has some tests in there. Okay. I don't think that's different. Okay, let me look at API again. What am I missing? Invalid scope, package backend not found. Turbo prune scope backend. So where is that failing? That's failing right here. Turbo prune scope backend. Okay, so it did copy. I'm not sure why that's failing. Okay, using this example, let's see if there's anything special we have to do with this example. Oh, that's cool. Okay, dget. Okay. I haven't heard of that before, but that looks like a utility to extract a subdirectory out of a Git repository by itself. So like you could extract this with Docker example. That's cool. Okay, Docker. The repo is configured to be built with Docker and Docker Compose. To build all apps in this repo, create a network, build prod using build kit, using new build kit engine. Compose Docker CLI build, Docker build kit, build parallel. Start prod in detach mode. Okay, I am actually not sure what build kit is. I'm guessing that is a new thing or newish. Okay, let's utilize their command here. Run this from the root. I don't think it's not a network issue yet. Let's run this from the root. Maybe there's something that build kit enables to allow this build to be successful. I'm not sure. Let's try this out. Okay, again, yeah, package backend not found. I'm going to do a project find, see if I could find API, see if there's anything referencing API. I don't see that. Tell you what, let's pull down their example and I want to see their example work. See what happens. Okay, so I'm going to use this dget thing. That's pretty cool. Let's see. Let's start a new tab out. I'm going to go into my code directory, and we are going to create a with Docker example. Actually, I'm going to call that something else. I'm going to call that Turborepo with Docker. That's what I'm going to call it. Cool. I'm not going to initialize anything. I'm not going to change anything here. I just want to run this. I'm going to try not creating this network first. I don't know if that's needed. Let's see. Okay, so error could not construct graph, reading yarn lock. Okay, so let's run yarn first. They actually don't have that in our docs. I could contribute here and add to the docs that you need to run yarn first. Okay, so this is interesting. It is this parallel flag. I can see that it's building multiple Docker containers in parallel here. That's pretty nice. I haven't used that before. Okay, theirs is looking more successful than mine. Looks like we're getting further. Okay, no errors. That's nice. Again, I haven't created the network yet. I kind of think that that will be automatic. Let's run our Docker Compose. And I'm not going to run it detached because I want to see the logs. So we're just going to run Docker Compose. Okay, you do have to create the network. All right. Docker Compose up. 3000, 3001. There we are. I don't know what this app does. Hello, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, so this is running. I'm not sure why theirs was that much different than ours. It must be something. So let's go back through their example a bit more. I'm going to open up their example in VS Code, and we're going to go through this. So we've already taken a look at this turbo.json. I don't believe there's much different here. Package.json, this is generically referring to apps/star packages.star. There's nothing in here that is specifically referring to API or anything like that. If I go into apps, API, we do have this Dockerfile. This is the line where it's failing. They did have the triple dot in the example, so there's no issue there, most likely. Okay. Let's take a look. Let's see. Don't see anything weird in tsconfig. Let's take a look in their package.json. They have some interesting arguments here, but overall, I don't see anything that should be tripping us up. A little frustrating. I know I've really just kind of skimmed the docs and I'm picking and choosing here. Let's see. I don't think it's the network thing. However, that is one of the main differences between ours. So I don't think it's that, because I think we're not even to the point yet of needing a network. But let's try it. So let's do a form hub network. Just to see if this is it. I don't think it is, but I could be wrong. I'm guessing all of the images will need this. I could have an issue with volumes. That's interesting. It may be my, okay, so before I do this networks thing, I just spotted that. Before I do this networks thing, I'm going to take out my volumes declaration. That could be an issue. I'm going to take that out. And let's see if we can get this building before we're trying to attach our local volumes here so that we can kind of hot restart our apps. Let's try that. So I'm going to run yarn again from the root. And let's do, I did not have to do a yarn build, I just realized in their example. So let's do the fancy schmancy not that. Do their fancy schmancy build command. This thing. It may be the volumes. Let's cross our fingers and hope that it is. Ah, dang it. Okay, still not that. Invalid scope, package backend not found. I think I'm going to have to figure this out, and then I'm going to create a shorter video for the folks who want to follow along and not watch me flail here. Okay, so what if I took a different approach? Since I know the example's running, maybe I can start with the example as a base instead of the standard create turbo that we ran at the beginning. Okay, I'm also going to try one more thing. So I'm here in the Turborepo with Docker example. Let me run a Docker PS. Okay, we are running this somewhere. I don't. Oh, this is running over in iTerm. Okay. So we're going to shut down our existing running containers. I'm going to rename our API service to Backend. And I'm going to see if I'm missing anything where we have to like register these app names. It doesn't look like it to me. Let's say I wanted to name this Backend. So if I just rename the directory Backend, and within our Docker Compose, I reference Backend. And within here, instead of API, I say Backend. I'm just curious if that name breaks anything, like if I'm not referencing it somewhere. So once again, let's copy in our build command. Okay. That did break it. Error, invalid scope, package backend not found. So there is something to do with the name of this all. Oh, I wonder if it's an, okay. It might be the name in package.json. That sounds right. Okay. So package not found, package backend not found, it literally means package, as in package.json. Okay, so let's let this go all the way through. It built just fine. So let's run a Docker Compose up. We've got backend and web instead of API and web. Let's refresh. That's loading. Let's say Dustin instead of Kevin. Hello, Dustin. Okay, so I did miss a place. We have to name the package in package.json. Let me pull out some things into different screens here. We've got a lot of VS Codes open. So I'm switching back to the original Form Hub Turborepo Monorepo that we've been working on. And instead of kind of shifting gears a bit, we're going to go back to what we were working on. And I have the backend named Ultimate Node Stack right now, because that's the starter that I started with. Instead, we're going to name this backend. And let's see if that allows us to build the package. So it just goes to show you, you can run into some roadblocks sometimes, and it just takes trial and error, trying different things out, backing into a place or an example of things that are working, and then trying to move forward step by step until it breaks, like we found the example breaking when I changed the package name. Okay, so anyway, to finish my statement, it just takes some trial and error sometimes. You can bang your head against the desk. Sometimes you got to leave, get up, go for a coffee, go to sleep, come back to it in the morning. It can get frustrating sometimes, but this is how it is. And usually it's one little thing like that that you'll figure out in the end. Okay, so this is what I was expecting. So we got to the step of trying to build Prisma, and we're getting like this OpenSSL sort of issue. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying the Node Alpine Docker base image doesn't have all of the dependencies that Prisma needs. So let's see if we can upgrade these Alpines one at a time, because I want to upgrade the least amount possible in order to make this work. So I believe how this works is anytime you have a from statement, everything below it is running from that build stage. So it's not that one because we're running our Prisma generate here. So I believe it is from this installer. So in the installer, instead of using Node Alpine, let's try using just Node. And later I want to specify a version in there, but we'll just start with Node. Okay, we've saved that. Let's try running our build again. APK not found. Okay. APK is the Alpine package manager or something like that. The node image is not based on Alpine. So it is a bit different. Now, it may be weird to use Alpine and non-Alpine together. So I tell you what, yeah, that sounds like it may create some issues. Maybe. Tell you what, let's just not run update here. I'm going to comment that out. We would use a different update. I'd have to go back and look at whether it's Debian or whatever the node image is based upon. I can option click on that. Awesome. Let's see. So if we're looking at latest, we'd have to follow these down the chain, but we've got, I'm not seeing it right off the bat here. But anyway, got distracted. Okay, so we're going to not run the package updates in that step and see if we can get further. No space left on device. I can't tell you how often this happens. I'm sure I have to figure out a way to make this happen less often, but the more you build and build and build and build and build things, you will run out of space. So I'm going to show you how to clear the space. I'm not going to worry about trying to expand my space today, but in case you happen to run into this as well, which is why it's helpful to watch videos like this where other people are failing too, you'll know what to do. So docker system prune all. You may not have to type the dash, but this prunes all unused or unrunning containers. Now, keep in mind, this might be pruning something that you're in progress with. So keep this in mind before you run this. But this is going to help me prune things that are not currently running. And it gives you the full stack. So it removes all stopped containers, all networks not used by at least one container, all images without at least one container associated, all build cache. Prunes a whole bunch of things. And so I just got 38 gigs of my life back. So let's see if this will run now. By the way, let me know in the comments down below if you like this type of video where we kind of learn things together. I've never done one like this before. Usually I'm doing something that I've done several times before or I'm very familiar with. So let me know if you like this type of thing, that's kind of just experimenting together. Looking pretty good. Okay, so that's our first successful build. Yes. Okay, that's our first successful build in our own repository with Prisma, with everything hopefully that we need. So drum roll, let's see if we can run Docker Compose and get this all going. Now, I believe in our example, yes, we have Docker Compose running. So I'm going to Control-C out of that. I want to make sure everything is stopping. I don't know why theirs takes so long to stop. Let's do a Docker PS. OK, so nothing is running in Docker. OK, let's from our Docker Hub, form a hub. Let's do a Docker Compose up. It's going to pull down Redis and Postgres that we need. Great. OK, database is running. The backend exited. Permission denied. OK, that's likely. They are saying in their example Dockerfile, don't run production as root. This Dockerfile is not for production. This is solely for our development purposes. So I'm actually going to comment all of this out. And we're not going to add a user or group or anything like that. OK, so let me save. We're going to rebuild. OK, that was pretty quick. And let's do a Docker Compose up. Okay, we got a different error this time. It's always nice to get a new error. OK, so Redis started up just fine. Postgres started up just fine. We were able to run yarn build this time and compile our source code with SWC. So it's super duper fast. It's saying that Prisma client has not been initialized yet. So that's likely due to this whole build stage thing, and perhaps we ran Prisma generate in the wrong place. So we might need to do it instead of up here, do it actually down here in the runner. So I'm going to move that to here. And actually, we probably need to do that after we switch our working directory. So after we switch into our backend, run Prisma generate, and then run our commands. Let's try that. OK, control seeing out again. We're going to build again. This may take some trial and error to figure out the actual, it may take some research to figure out the appropriate place to put that. OK, so we have our issue here that we're in Alpine again. So let's get out of Alpine for this case. And I tell you what, since this is now in the runner, let me see if we can switch the others back to Alpine. I don't know if that's weird or not for some of them to be in Alpine and some of them not. I don't know. That also might be some research. But let's try just having our runner that needs to run the Prisma generate as the non-Alpine one and see if that works. Notice it's lots of see if that works. It probably is weird to install your dependencies on one version of Linux and run them on a different version. That sounds bad. We do have a builder here, which looks like it's preparing our Turborepo. And then we have an installer that does the yarn install. Even though this technically worked, I think I'm going to go ahead and remove Alpine, at least from the installer. It would seem like between running and installing, you'd want to install the things that are appropriate for the same base subsystem. So I'm going to do that, and we're going to build one more time. Oops, we have the APK update thing here. This works. I'm going to go in and delete our original comments. OK, we do have, I want to make sure we get, let's see. OK. OK, so that build went through. Run a Docker PS. OK, making sure we're not running anything in the background accidentally. So Docker compose up. OK, a new error. Always good to get a new error. And it's a good one. So the backend built, it compiled, which is the same thing. It started, because we're getting server ready. We've got SQL queries running, but our tables don't exist in the database. This is actually a very, very good sign. So everything really seemed to get up and running here, but we don't have the tables. So we need to run our migrations. That's a great sign. OK, so let's go into our apps and backend. And in here, I have several scripts which help us to do things like this. So Docker DB migrate runs the commands we need to migrate our database. So yarn Docker DB migrate. And this should add in the tables that we need. Okay, there we go. Let's see. So I'm going to do a Docker compose start backend. It should start it up over on the left-hand side. Okay. We got some queries, we got some inserting, we got some committing. So it looks like we have the appropriate tables now. Let's pull open our GraphQL instance. See if we can query some things. And we can. Oh my goodness. Okay. Awesome. Okay, that's really exciting. So we have our backend running in Docker. It is structured in the Turborepo Monorepo. So that's really nice. This is still the example. I keep opening up the wrong VS Code window, so I'm going to close that. Move these back around. Okay, so this means our backend is running. We're querying things. Excellent. That is really great news. Okay, since we've gotten to a working state here, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm committing some things. So let's just go ahead and add in all of our changes. Primarily, it's deleting the packages we weren't using, which was a shared UI package, deleting the old web app, the old Docs app. We have added a Docker compose file to the root. The yarn.lock file at the root level is modified. I don't see where it's adding our backend app. Untracked files, apps. Okay. So when I used Finder to copy in our backend, it looks like I copied in along with it the Git directory. We don't want that. So I'm going to remove the Git directory. Okay, that should make a big difference. Okay, so let's run a git status to see where we are now. It says new file apps backend. It's not a file. Let's get reset apps backend. Okay, there we go. I had it. Looks like it got in a weird state because I had already tried to add it before. So I have So I just reset what I had added in Git and added it back. Hi, Claudio. Hope I said that correctly. Okay, so we have that coming in here, Docker ignore, ESLint, git ignore, just making sure we've got things in here. VS Code settings are in the backend directory. That's probably not where we want those to go. Those might need to be elevated to the root directory. So I'm going to file that away for later. Let's see. We've still got apps, docs, and web in here. Did I not delete those? I did. I don't know why. Oh, deleted. Okay. Green looked like added. Green means deleted. Green means everything. New file, deleted. Okay, that looks good. So add backend and Docker. Committed. Great. So we have a backend running. Let's get our front-end app in here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the non-devy thing again and use Finder to just copy our directories. So I'm going to copy over FormHub FE into, I option drug that, by the way, so it's a copy on Mac. Copying in FormHub FE into our apps directory. I'm going to go in and delete the .git directory inside there, just like I did for the backend. .git directory is where all of the Git repo stuff is stored. So if you just kind of want to wipe away the Git history, then you can just delete the .git directory. I'm going to rename this to Frontend, and I'm going to delete the node modules directory. We'll let it install fresh. Okay, so let's go in, and we have a front-end directory now. Let's go into app/frontend. We're going to remove the .git directory. Okay, so we should see in our pending changes here, great, that we're adding in the app/frontend. Okay, that's what we want to see. Okay, so we have apps backend, apps frontend. Now, the frontend application, I don't actually want to run in Docker. The frontend application, I want to just run locally so that we can get good hot reloading for this application. So even though these are in a monorepo, they're not all running in the same way. The backend will run inside of Docker. The front end will run here on my local machine. But Turborepo is helping us to put all these together in one code repository. And if we wanted any shared code between these, which is a real life use case that we're running into more at my company. Just here lately, we had a library on both a backend and front end, which doesn't always occur. It doesn't happen all that frequently. But when you do want the same thing on both ends, it would be nice to put it in a place like this. Sometimes creating a separate package, pushing that up to NPM or somewhere, that can get a little burdensome. And so it'd be nice to have something like this in a monorepo where you could have a local package that you're testing and developing all here together. So I do want to run this front end locally. Let's go through Turborepo examples. I want to see what their Create React App example is, because our front end is based on Create React App. You can watch the other video if you'd like to see how we built this, but I can see that via React scripts. Create React App always uses React scripts here. So let's see if there's anything special. Don't see anything special in turbo.json. Okay, we have, for dev, we have turbo, run dev, no cache. Okay, so here's the thing. Whenever we run this, I want to exclude the backend from running locally because it's going to be running in Docker. So I probably want to figure out how to do that. How we run only certain things. So what happens if I just want to run one of the apps? So we have build. Okay, so maybe we can use this filter thing. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so if we go to the root package.json, there is a build and a dev in here. In the build, let's just filter this to front end. And then also in run dev, let's filter this to front end. Essentially, we want to filter out the backend. We only want to build and run the things that are required for the front end. Also, we know that we need to name our package. Do that. We've deleted our .git directory. We've named our package. I think that's pretty good. So let's do a yarn build. That should build our front end. Let's do a yarn. So we've copied in our front end. We haven't installed the dependencies. So we're installing the dependencies now. Okay, it's expecting a different version of Node. Let's see, what version am I running? I'm running 17 here. Let me go ahead and upgrade to 18. So Volta. I don't want to pin. How do I just switch? Volta use 18. Not pin. Maybe install. Probably node at. Okay, we're on 18. Yarn. I love Volta, by the way. If you're not using Volta, Volta is a great way to easily switch between versions of Node. It's a lifesaver. Okay, so we've installed our dependencies. Let's do a yarn build. Oops, okay, I realize I'm in the wrong directory. So I'm inside the front end app. That's not what I want. I want to be in the very, very root. So let's do a yarn build. Like, that doesn't look very Turborepo-y. Okay, now technically this is creating a production build. I don't really need to do that because I'm developing locally. However, I'm curious. Okay, this worked. Interesting. Okay, let's just do a yarn dev. Okay, so it says running dev in 1 packages. there is not a dev command in our front-end package. So let's change our start command to dev and see if that makes things happy. It does. Okay, looking good. So, okay, y'all, this is, oh my goodness, I think we did it. Okay, so what happened here was that we ran run dev, and it only ran in the front end app, because meanwhile, we're running our backend over here in Docker. It's running things in parallel. We're only running one thing, but we'll leave that in there. And it appropriately built for development. It opened up in the browser. It worked. It loaded data from the backend. And I should be able to hit this button, and nothing happens immediately. But if I refresh, yes, then I have our mock data that was just generated on the backend. So that means it's working. Excellent. Alrighty, so let's see what we have changes pending for. So we updated our commands. Yarn, okay, apps front end has a lot of files now. That all looks good. Great, okay, add front end app. Commit. We're gonna commit everything. Oh my gosh, I didn't know you could click on the intersection of this. We're learning all sorts of things today. Okay. Well, folks, that is pretty exciting. We went from knowing nothing about Turborepo except that we wanted it, to being able to get some existing apps in here, a backend app running in Node, a front-end app running with Create React App, the backend app running in Docker, the front-end app running locally, getting those all within the same repository, working, building, not conflicting with each other, and that's pretty exciting. So I now have all of my code for this application as a whole, meaning I don't need to manage multiple repositories, meaning I could create branches and pull requests that affect both the backend and the front end, and do all sorts of things here. Add packages that are shared between the two. This is really exciting. Like I said, we manage several apps at my company. They all have multiple repositories, and sometimes that can get a bit overwhelming. So doing something like this would be really nice. So I hope you enjoyed this. This took our example from the last video where we built this example app to collect form submissions. What I want to do is get this in production. So we have this running locally. We put it in a Monorepo. I'm undecided yet. This is an hour-and-a-half video so far. I'm undecided yet. I might create another one that is what we did here, but shorter. So if people don't want to follow along in all the learnings and the mistakes, then they can watch a shorter one. I may or may not make that. But this is all with the intention to get to a production deployment. And part of the inspiration here is we're going to deploy with the Render platform. Render is a phenomenal hosting platform. No, they are not the sponsor of this video, but they should be. And they just announced Monorepo support in production, literally like not that long ago. So I'm really excited about this. This is one of the reasons why at our company we haven't moved to monorepos yet, because it wasn't here. Hi, Claudia. I see you have a question. Go ahead and type that in, and I'll see if I can answer that live here before we end. So Yeah, so I'm really, really excited about monorepo support in Render, getting everything in one repository and being able to use this. So in a future video, soon future video, we're going to be taking this example application and putting it in production. Okay, so Claudio asks here, I've never done this before. Let me see if we show this comment. Ooh, excellent. What about 70 projects in one monorepo? That's a lot of projects. I am not an expert on monorepos. As you can see here, I'm kind of learning this as we go. It would be my take, though, to use monorepos for things that are related. So there are a lot of different strategies for how companies and teams use monorepos. Some teams, I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe teams like Facebook and maybe Google, I'm not sure. There are several large, well-known companies that use monorepos for everything. Literally every piece of code at the organization, even though it's huge, is put into one repository. Now they have teams of developers that build tools to make that happen and make that possible. I feel like open source tooling is kind of just now catching up to making monorepos related. Now, Claudio also says, all the projects are related with same packages. Okay, so that makes a pretty good case here. So if you've got 70 things, especially if you have to maintain 70 different packages and separate repositories, that sounds like a crazy headache. So I would say that this would be worth exploring. Turborepo is designed to make things fast, as they say here, high performance build system. So it's designed to run things in parallel, make things fast, build incrementally, cache intelligently. So I would say yes. I would say yes, this is definitely something to take a look at, especially if you've got something that large. I don't know of any limits on Turborepo, what those limits are, what people have used it for, but this is definitely where I would start. So thanks for your question. All right, well, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning along. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you like this type of video where we're just kind of figuring things out together. I might do more of these. And yeah, I'm digging monorepos. I like this. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this today. Leave me a like if you liked it, and I will see you next time.